Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. Today I'm here to do a wrap up of books number 80 to 85 of the books that I'm reading in 2023. So let's get right to it. Book number 81. Oh, 81 through 85 I meant. I forgot that book number 80 I already talked about. 81 through 85. Book number 81 was The Color of Money, Black Banks and the Racial Wealth Gap by Mehrsa Baradaran. This is a must read. If you're interested in questions of reparation, if you're interested in questions of Black history and American history and income inequality, this is the must. If you're into even like the history, economic history, that kind of thing, this is just a must. It talks about the attempts at forming a Black bank because a lot of white-owned banks did not cater to Black customers. In fact, a lot of them would not cater to Black customers. They would not hire Black tellers, nothing, right? And so there was attempts from the Civil War point on forward to create Black banks that would cater to the Black communities. It was badly needed, especially when emancipation occurred, and now you have all of these new citizens with hopefully disposable income. And a lot of it started with creating a bank for Black veterans who were getting paid for their service in the military and had nowhere to put their money. So initially that was a government-backed bank, specifically as a savings bank, just to store money, and then it became a kind of more regular bank, an investment bank where the money is getting used to invest in other things. So really fascinating, by the way, because especially if you don't fully understand the way banks work, because most of us really just don't. We just kind of trust that our money is safe somewhere, and we don't think much about it until there's a financial crisis. And so this kind of explores some of that, and the failures of the federal government, because this first Black bank that was seemed to be backed by the federal government really was not when it becomes a finance bank, and how it fails the Black community. Basically, like, I think it was something like a third of Black wealth disappeared with the failure of this one bank at the very beginning. And the government really should have stepped in to do something about this, but they didn't. And it stands out in contrast to the many times in American history in which the US government has stepped in to safeguard white-owned banks. And it contrasts with the history of immigrant banks. For example, Bank of America, one of the biggest banks in the U.S. today, probably in the world, began as the Bank of Italy that catered to Italian immigrants in the U.S. As that bank grew, with the support of the federal government, it becomes one of the largest banks ever. But it had the government support that Black banks did not. And to me, this is really important for understanding how the federal government failed Black communities over and over again. It wasn't just in like the South denying Black citizens their right to vote and rights of citizenship. It was also the federal government over and over again failing Black communities, because you put this failure of the banks and combine it with a failure to allow Black people to own property in the United States, and you see then how building wealth within Black communities was near impossible. It just has been. And what I loved here is that the author also connects it to the need for reparations, for example, things like that. So there's just so many layers of information here. It is a largely academic book, so if you're new to nonfiction, this might not be the place to start. But if you regularly read nonfiction and you're not afraid of like a ton of information, like every chapter is packed with a ton of information, then I think this would be a good one. However, it might not be for you, in which case maybe I should dedicate a video to talking more in detail about some of the information in this book, because it's incredibly critical, and I can't believe that more people don't talk about this. All right, in the interest of time, for the purpose of this video, I will move on to book number 82 on my list, which was Horse Barbie by Geena Rocero. This is an amazing memoir about Geena Romero's time as a beauty pageant contestant in the Philippines, and then her move to the United States. So in the Philippines, she participated in queer and trans beauty pageants, and she won all the top awards, basically reached the top of that field, and was openly trans. People knew she was accepted by her family, by her community, but then makes the move to the United States, and what she experiences is really interesting because she talks about how in the Philippines she could be trans without any problem culturally, but could never have her ID say female. When she moves to the US, she has access to that. She has access to gender affirming surgeries. She has access to her legal paperwork reading female, but she cannot live openly trans in the way she would want to be, especially when she starts modeling, and anyone knowing her secret endangers her career and her livelihood. And yet she has a full, really rich life. It's really amazing. I highly recommend this book. I do wish that she had criticized like the beauty pageant world a bit more, and the modeling world more, in terms of like creating gender ideals and unrealistic expectations. But other than that, I found that this was just a really amazing book and well worth reading. The next book on my list is Bad Moon Rising by Luisa Colón. The cover of this book is what attracted me to it. It's just fantastic. I'm not sure that the cover has a ton to do with what's actually in the story. This book left a negative impression. Like, I didn't hate this book, but it did leave me confused. And to film this wrap up, I had to go back in and look because I couldn't remember most of the plot. Oh. And the thing is that you are following two perspectives: the perspective of a teenager, Elodia, and then the perspective of Miles. And you have a feeling something bad is going to happen. In Elodia's perspective, you're seeing how she's interacting with a new teacher, and like these layers of potentially kind of like magic, mysticism coming in, and you just have a feeling nothing's good's gonna happen. And in Miles's perspective, you know it's so overall, this was a disappointing book for me, but it's short, and if anybody's interested in it, I would not discourage anybody from it. Go take a look at it, check it out, please. Next book on my list, and yes, I lost a piece of the clip here in between talking about books, and I'm just quickly refilming it with a bright light right to my side. So let's get this done. The next book was The Chinese Must Go: Violence, Exclusion, and the Making of the Alien in America by Beth Lew-Williams. And this is another amazing work of nonfiction that I read in preparation for teaching the U.S. history class that I'm currently teaching. This is a book I'm currently using. It has a ton of information, but it is extremely useful. It has really a quite easy to understand argument. The argument is that violence in the American West was instrumental in the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act and restrictions on Chinese immigration that lead up to the Chinese Exclusion Act. And it is a book that is full of information, but it's really easy to follow and really interesting, especially when making connections to Asian American violence in the present and the history there is of this. It's also important in terms of understanding immigration policy, because this restrictions on Chinese immigrants were the first time that the U.S. was developing immigration policy and enforcement. There was no federal policy on immigration or a way of enforcing it until we see this in the 1800s with Chinese immigrants. And so it's just a really important history. I'm currently talking about it with students because there's so many layers, right? The violence was instrumental here, but so was foreign policy. This was at a time in which the U.S. was trying to open up Chinese markets to American markets, and for in Europe was as well. So it was an attempt by the Western European countries and the U.S. to control the Chinese economy. And in trying to do that, and pass immigration restrictions on Chinese immigrants, there was a bit of conflict, right? They didn't want to anger China, and that plays an important role. Also important here is that there was no mechanism for enforcing restrictions on immigration at that time. And so we're shown how this plays out both in the lives of immigrants and the people who are trying to enforce this immigration policy in everyday life for people living in border areas, in the courts, and just layers of this. It's an amazing, amazing history, and I am really having fun having these discussions with students today as they make connections from the past to the present. All right, book number 85 is The Apartment by Ana Menéndez. This is a book that I saw getting a lot of praise online because it was recently released, and it's every chapter in this book is the story of one of the residents of an apartment in an apartment complex in Florida. And so sometimes you see like Cuban immigrants living in the apartment, other immigrants, artists, people who are really struggling, and you get a little window, a little chapter into their lives and the conflict that is occurring in their lives, or they're living in this apartment. For me, it was an okay read. Some of the stories I really enjoyed, others I was a little bit more meh on. They do come together. There is a collective story happening here that comes together at the end that I think Menéndez does really well. I don't know if I just was not quite in the mood for something like this at the time I picked it up, but for me it was a good book, not great book. But again, if you are at all interested in, I would encourage you to check it out. So those are books number 81 to 85 of the books that I'm reading in 2023. Latinx Heritage Month begins tomorrow. And I haven't decided what exactly I'm going to do for it, and I am relieving myself of some of that pressure because Alba recently sent in a video. She reminded me that I read diversely year-round, and I am Latina year-round, so I don't need the pressure to do something specifically for Latina Heritage Month. But every year I like to do something to commemorate and to help people out who are looking for Latina books. So anybody that is looking for Latina recommendations, that is a major element, a major theme in the kinds of books that I recommend all year round on my channel. And I will be continuing that during Latina Heritage Month and after Latina Heritage Month. So if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts, if any of them sound interesting, if you disagree with my thoughts on any of these, please leave me a comment down below. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.